Is Sony's hardware division going in for the kill after Microsoft's repeated software stumbles? So the context for this is that, we talked about it last week on DF Direct Weekly, where there's some crazy deals happening with PlayStation 5 at the moment. Those deals have only become even more aggressive. The ability to buy a disc-based PlayStation 5, the cost of doing so is tumbling seemingly on a week-by-week basis. I think I saw one for like £350. The discounting seems to have moved to the US now a bit more aggressively. I've seen standalone PlayStation 5s with disc drive for $450 or even $399, I think I saw at one point,
Wow.
which is actually the launch price of the PlayStation 4 and the PS4 Pro. So it's kind of like a pretty amazing sort of threshold to cross for what was an incredibly expensive machine to make. Meanwhile, we're not seeing much momentum on the Microsoft side of things with the Xbox Series consoles, which I suspect is what Andre is talking about, as well as repeated software stumbles. John, I'm interested in your opinion on this. I don't think the software is really the issue on Xbox because it's got Starfield and Forza and other great stuff coming up. But the hardware side of things, we seem to be seeing different priorities from each of the platform holders. Sony is doubling down on getting consoles into homes, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is potentially just reflective of Microsoft's greater strategy of increasing its sort of presence in the service space. You know, the rise of Game Pass and being able to play on different platforms, including the PC, Series S, of course. I mean, they told us specifically, I mean, Series X manufacturing, the cost of making that box and selling it, it's not insignificant, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, maybe with the way things have been going, they're looking at the business in a different way currently. And maybe they're not interested in like trying to compete with Sony on just getting boxes in homes because they have other boxes in homes and other devices that can still use all of their services and access the Xbox games. So, I mean, fundamentally, at the end of the day, they want people playing games on their platforms somehow,
Right.
whether it's Windows, an Xbox, streaming, tablets,
Right.
like that's the goal, right? Like get people into the ecosystem, get people playing Xbox games. They got Starfield coming up. That's a big deal. I don't know. It does feel like they've stopped pushing hardware in the same way that they used to as a result. It's
Yeah.
very odd.
I
Well,
think even Xbox has got the sort of lower price point covered with Series S anyway. So from the outset, it was already kind of in a better place compared to PS5, which had two SKUs, but still mostly people were focused on the disc-based PS5.
Right.
So yeah, it feels like Sony has more ground to make up there in terms of offering something at a lower price point people
Well,
can afford.
but the difference there is that those machines are the same in terms of performance. It's just the disk drive, where Series S and Series
Yeah,
X are very different. And it does seem like they've
yeah,
prioritized Series S over X to some degree, doesn't it? Like it feels like the Series X is like, here's this high end option for those that want it, but our main focus is on the mass market, lower price points, PC, Series S, all of that. And the
mhm.
Series X is just kind of out there, like as an option. Like I feel like I've even seen that there's been shortages lately where getting a Series X is not a trivial thing at the moment.
Yeah.
So,
Well, obviously Series S was always there as a lower cost option in the hope that it would get mainstream adoption, right? And
right.
a lot of consoles into homes. But there was that bizarre announcement of the 1 terabyte Series S
Oh
at
yeah, that.
349, which, if it had been at 299, replacing the older model, it would have made a lot more sense to me. But we're reaching the point now where with this massive discount drive from Sony, a 399 PlayStation 5
it's
versus a one
close.
terabyte Series S, it's only $50 more expensive. It's a no-brainer, right? We've seen massive sales spikes for PlayStation 5 because of this initiative. And, rightfully so, because it's a pretty great deal, right? Better deal than I think a Series S is. I don't know. It does seem to
It's
be
tricky.
it does
Yeah,
seem to be that Sony is being excessively, I'm not going to say excessively because it's obviously highly successful in terms of doing these price cuts and getting machines into homes, and we aren't seeing any kind of similar strategy or reaction from Microsoft to counter it. Could be you're right, John, that selling consoles loses them money, so why not divert people to Game Pass? Hopefully they're on PC. Maybe they'll get a Series S because, Game Pass is a highly compelling offering on its own right. But there does seem to be this concept of momentum where, Sony is basically going for it. They're moving into higher gear, whereas Microsoft kind of isn't. Maybe we'll see some sort of
Yeah.
more aggressive move as we move into Q4, and there's a lot of additional deals and Black Friday movements. I don't know. Any
I just
final
remember
thoughts on this?
the aggressive Microsoft back in when they first launched the original Xbox early on anyway. If you recall, they had to drop the price within the first 6 months after launch or so.
Yeah, I remember.
Sony came out at that E3 and was like, all right, PS2 is $199. Microsoft scrambled like the next day and they're like, yeah, Xbox is also $199. And that was only 6 months after launch, right? I feel like the Microsoft of today would not have responded at all in terms of hardware pricing.
No. They know their business model is the Game Pass business model. They're not selling these consoles at a loss, as far as I'm aware anyway, as they probably did with their original Xbox to kind of match Sony and PS2. So no, maybe after, maybe Q4 or just after.
Well,
In
I
April.
was thinking about this. If you look at Xbox 360, they were super aggressive there on pricing.
Yeah, they were.
They had the two models. They had a really cheap Xbox 360 that you could buy.
The arcade edition.
Yep, absolutely. And the hard drive model was still, significantly cheaper at launch a year earlier than PlayStation 5 was for, a decent spec machine. That's kind of like the sort of aggression I'd have liked to have seen. I think aggression is possibly the wrong word. Hunger. Are we seeing
Right,
hunger from Microsoft? I'm not seeing it.
Not quite the same. It also made me consoles always get revisions. We've talked about some of the PS5 revisions where they've made internal changes. Are you aware of any internal changes that have happened with the Series X?
Not that I'm aware
Been
of.
very quiet, hasn't it? If it has.
I mean, it was a very, very well built machine from day one, so perhaps you don't need those types of things. But I'm just surprised we've seen like no details, and I'm just wondering if any revisions have been made at all.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't really got too much more to say about this. I'm hoping to see something more from Microsoft as, Starfield hoves into view, because this is kind of like a gigantic opportunity for Microsoft to actually sort of deliver something that's going to drive console sales. So, I mean, I guess it's going to be a case of holding on and seeing what happens.
I guess there's also the argument that they've been kind of playing down their position in the market during the whole ABK thing, like trying to paint themselves as like the competitor that can't compete, and they need this to compete. So I feel like that has been reflected a little bit in the way they've presented themselves lately. And now that that's I don't know the current status of it actually, but I could see them kind of kicking back into gear at a certain point if that's what they want to do. And I would imagine at least when Starfield hits, I would expect to start seeing some big advertisement and some noise around that, because it's like probably one of up there with Zelda is like one of the biggest games of the year, I would say.
Absolutely, yeah. So hopefully it will be the beginning of a sustained push. Obviously, summer is a pretty quiet time for gaming generally, but obviously Q3, Q4 is going to be pretty big. So let's see what happens.